So as if sexual reproduction couldn't get crazy enough, nature, one of the things we'll always study in zoology is that nature produces infinite diversity. You can never say a certain set of animals acts only in a certain way or does only certain things, because nature is going to find a way to prove you wrong. It's always going to throw some pickup in the plan. It's always going to give some variation in there that doesn't fit their standard mold. And we see that in sexual reproduction as well. There's this concept called parthenogenesis. Actually, not even a concept, it's an act. It's a type of reproduction. It simply means, it's called parthenogenesis. It's got the word genesis in it. And that genesis usually means the origins of something. So with parthenogenesis, this means virgin origins. In other words, this is kind of like virgin birth, because it occurs in species that are generally sexually, or taxon that are generally sexually reproducing, but sometimes they don't. Imagine if you're, for example, there's a species of fish in Arizona that lives in streams, and during the dry times of the year, Arizona's in a desert, during the dry times of the year, most of the stream dries up, so there's only small pools of water left. In that pool is who you're going to be able to reproduce with, and if there's not enough males or females in that pool, that could be a problem for your species. Some of them can go through sequential hermaphroditism and swap genders, but another thing that can happen, the female is able to lay an egg. If that egg is made through meiosis, it'll be haploid and just contain half of the information. But what if she could produce an egg through mitosis? It wouldn't technically be an egg, but it would still be kind of like a copy of her, a clone of her, and she could lay that. It would grow into essentially a clone of her. That means if this were to occur in the entire population would be females. I mean, imagine that, ladies. Who needs a guy, right? Just lay an egg and it grows into another one of you. But this is what we call amiotic parthenogenesis. Amiotic means without meiosis, so they're not splitting the number of chromosomes down to when they make this egg. Essentially, they're just making a copy of it. That egg is, I keep using the word egg, but it's kind of a Pell term for it. But you know what I mean. This egg that is produced that is diploid simply doesn't need a sperm. It's already diploid. It just grows into another female. So we also call that asexual parthenogenesis. It's essentially cloning. Then we have meiotic parthenogenesis, where the egg is actually formed through meiosis. So it goes through a process where the number of chromosomes is cut down. It's essentially cut in half. So in this case, the egg still has, in order for the egg to start going through gastrulation and dividing and going from a zygote to an embryo, it has to actually come in contact with a sperm, because there's a chemical cue that the sperm will give this egg that allows it to start dividing. But there's no fertilization that occurs. In this case, you would have females that are sometimes females, sometimes males, depends on the species, that the resulting offspring would only be haploid. That's okay. It's still a full set of chromosomes. It's just not two full sets of chromosomes. We see this a lot in insects, as we'll look at in just a minute. But this condition where you're going through meiotic parthenogenesis to produce a haploid individual is called haplodiploidy, because some of the individuals may get fertilized and become diploid, and some of the individuals may have not been fertilized and remain haploid, but you have both of these making up the population of that particular species in that area. So parthenogenesis, you can have amiotic or meiotic parthenogenesis. Another word for the amiotic is the asexual parthenogenesis, and another word for the meiotic is haplodiploidy. A lot to go through, but this is kind of widespread in the animal kingdom. We don't see this just in insects. We also see this in types of vertebrates like fish. There's an entire population of lizards out in around Tucson that's essentially all female, because it was difficult for males and females to get together because of territory, or because you can imagine things like, what if there's a disease that came through that affected things that had the Y chromosome? It would wipe out most of the males. How do you keep your species going? Well, the females had to come up with a plan B, essentially. And just like they say in Jurassic Park, life will find a way, and we definitely see that. So here's a really good example of parthenogenesis. The example that we'll use is going to be honeybees. Now, most of us know that honeybees, or just bees in general, operate with what we consider to be a hive mind. There's a queen that leads it, and then there's workers and drones that follow and that have different jobs. But the way that their mating would occur, we'll start down here kind of with the queen. the queen is diploid. She has two complete sets of chromosomes. She is the result of a sperm and egg coming together. When she lays eggs, she goes through meiosis. So the eggs are cut in half to haploid, right? So we'll start with the eggs that do not get fertilized. Okay, so if the egg does not get fertilized, it becomes what we consider a drone. It stays haploid. Those essentially become males. Males are not workers, they're drones. They have other things that they do. Most not necessarily honeybees, but some of the bees that do this, the drones that end up being males, the male's job is essentially to just fight the other males and be the winner, and then when the queen's ready to reproduce, he'll be the one who gets to fertilize the eggs. That's it. But let's go back to the eggs that do get fertilized, okay? So the male comes through, he's haploid, he produces a sperm essentially through meiosis. He just makes, it's gametogenesis, but he makes a haploid cell from his haploid body. That sperm then fertilizes the egg. So now you have a 2N female, you have a diploid female. This is how females are made. They're the combination of sperm and egg. Some of the females are fed regular honey. Most of the females are fed regular honey. There's hormones in there that do a couple things to her. One, it sterilizes her, so she cannot reproduce. But also, it kind of puts her in the state of becoming a worker bee, and going and collecting flowers and working for defense and other things that the colony needs. But what about the ones that aren't? What about the females that are not given regular honey? One of them is usually given we call it royal jelly. It sounds a little weird, but that's what it's called. And essentially, it's a secretion from the queen that contains different hormones and proteins that cause that individual female to become the next queen bee, literally the next queen bee. And that is essentially the reproductive strategy of this particular type of species, in this case just looking at honeybees. But this is parthenogenesis. This is haplodiploidy because we have haploid and diploid individuals living in the population. The males are haploid, the females are diploid. Sterile females are the workers, and that one lucky individual that's given the royal jelly becomes the queen. And that's parthenogenesis.